Hey guys, Gil Butler here, the Primal Chef, coming to you today with another biOptimizer's recipe from the Primal Paleo cookbook. Today we're gonna be doing a three-part recipe. It's gonna be a baked salmon with a blueberry butter sauce, along with some roasted baby kale. Now, I know a lot of people think that kale is just disgusting. I've heard it all over the place. Everybody says they hate kale, and really, you just don't know how to cook it. If you do it these steps, trust me guys, trust me, it is going to be amazing. Okay, so first, let's get that kale rolling. So we have here, this is about a pound of baby kale. Baby kale is already better than the grown-up version. I think the taste is better, it's less bitter, and if you work with it properly, it's gonna be great. So, the first step is you want to start massaging the kale. So right now it is overflowing in this bowl, and as I use my hands, I can try to break it down, and that's gonna help start to tenderize the process. So get in there. We're looking for a deep tissue massage, not a Swedish massage. And you can see that it is already starting to reduce in size, fits in this bowl more. And that is the great first step. Now, phase two, we gotta rub it even more, massage it even more with avocado oil. So we're adding that in right there. There's measurements in the recipes, but also just eyeball it. If it looks like it's still too dry, you can add more. But it does eat up quite a bit of oil. So you can see, I haven't even started cooking the kale, and it's already shrunk about 50%. And that is what you want. You want it to be looking like it's almost cooked before you even start cooking it. Okay, so once it is nice and massaged, we're gonna spread it out evenly on a single layer on a baking sheet. Don't crowd it. If it's too crowded, use a bigger pan or cook less at a time, because it won't allow it to properly brown in the right places, and you're just gonna be having steamed kale, which won't be very good. Okay, so once the kale is on the baking sheet, you're gonna grab some salt, and we're gonna go with a roughly light layer. We don't wanna go too heavy at this stage because the kale is going to shrink down a lot. And if you season it to how it looks right now, it's gonna shrink, but the amount of salt is gonna stay there and it'll end up being too salty. So we just did a little sprinkle of salt on top. Now it's gonna go in the oven about 350 degrees. Now the whole process can end up taking close to a half hour, but the key is you wanna check on it every so often. By doing so, just by opening the oven for a second, a lot of the moisture that's coming off it is gonna escape, and that is gonna allow it to keep cooking. And I know it sounds counterintuitive because people say don't open the oven while you're cooking because you lose the heat. And there is some truth to that, but if you just do it very quickly, open, close, you'll see a bunch of steam come up without affecting the overall temperature, and that is part of making perfectly roasted kale. All right, so we'll check on that in just a few minutes. For now, let's get to the salmon. So I have two different types of salmon here. I wanted to show you guys the difference. I have farmed salmon, it's the Atlantic salmon, and then also wild king salmon. And which one to use is really up to you. There's pros and cons. There's a lot of debate out there as to which one is better from kind of a there's kind of 3 points that you have to look at, and that's the environmental, nutrition, and culinary sides to it. So for culinary, the Atlantic salmon absolutely tastes the best. It's kind of like when you eat 100% grass-fed meat versus meat that's almost always grass-fed, but then they finish it on grain. Often, since that grain ends up adding to the fat content, that meat ends up being better. So just like that with the Atlantic salmon, I think it actually tastes better than wild, but whether you want to stick with wild for any environmental or nutrition reasons, that's up to you. Again, a lot of debate as to which one is actually better for you and for the planet. So what we're gonna do now, we have our salmon fillets, going to rub them with avocado oil. That's gonna help prevent them from drying out, and it's going to make it so they cook more evenly. So rub that in. And now we're going to do some salt. Okay, and now we're gonna come in with some fresh dill. So a good amount on there. Dill and salmon, they are just like peanut butter and jelly together. And that is it for the salmon. Super simple, guys. It's gonna go in the oven. I like to keep it closer to 320 degrees, but if you're sharing an oven with something else, 350 is fine too. And the key to cooking salmon is do not overcook it. You can always put it back in for a couple minutes if you want, but you cannot uncook it. So I'm gonna go for just 10 minutes, check on it, and then go in increments of maybe just 1 to 2 minutes, because even if it looks like it's undercooked and you put it in for 3 minutes, it might be way overcooked by then. It goes very quick, especially when it's already at close to the temperature you want it. We're gonna set a timer for 10 minutes and we're gonna come work on the sauce. Okay, to make your sauce, this is gonna be the blueberry butter sauce. You're gonna need a small pan. You're gonna want it on medium heat. Great, so now we're adding in about 1/4 of a cup to 1/2 cup of blueberries. Doesn't need to be exact, and this can be fresh or frozen. Gonna let those get hot for just a little bit, and they're gonna start to break down and the juice will come out of them, which is exactly what we want. And if you need to, just to get the process started, you can always add a little bit of water. It'll end up cooking out. It'll just speed up the process. Okay, so you can see that the blueberries are starting to cook down. The juices around it are looking like blueberry juice, and we just want to keep that going. We're also gonna add in juice from about 1/2 of a lemon. And then just a little bit of salt, about it. Just a couple pinches, 1/4 teaspoon max. We're gonna be adding in salted butter later too, so if you're using unsalted butter, you might need to add some more salt, but for us, we're already good to go on that. Okay, so once it's starting to get a little bit syrupy like this, we're gonna try to speed up the process, encouraging it to keep breaking down. And using the back of a spoon or ladle or potato masher, you can just kind of press down on them, on the blueberries, try to smush them, since we're trying to make them into a sauce. All right, so this is almost where we want it. I'm gonna turn down the heat a bit just so it doesn't burn. All right, let's talk about dairy real quick. So a lot of you might not be eating dairy if you're following kind of a paleo diet, but the thing with that is a lot of people make an exception for butter as long as it is 100% grass-fed and finished, just like this one here. You can see it's more golden and less pale white like store-bought butter usually is. If you tolerate dairy, this is a great option that you can try out with very minimal to no negatives to it. If you are avoiding dairy completely, you can use, there are a lot of dairy-free butters that are on the market now that actually have pretty good ingredients. A lot of vegan butters that they sell at health food stores, primarily made from nuts. You can use that with this too if you want to keep it completely dairy-free, but it definitely tastes better for this one using regular butter. So this is becoming very thick. We're gonna take about 4 ounces of butter, cut it into small cubes. And since we're gonna be emulsifying, you do want the butter to be as cold as you can. It's okay if it is a little soft like this. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start adding in butter a little bit at a time with the heat off. So we can have still a hot area because we might go back and forth, but we're gonna take it off the heat, throw in a stick of butter, and start whisking. And you cannot rush this step. If you add in too much butter or you don't whisk enough, it won't emulsify and you'll be left with a really oily sauce on top of blueberries. But we want it to be all in one. So once that one's mostly melted, you can go in with another one. Same process. If it cools off too much and it's not melting, you can put it back on the heat. That's why we left the burner. But otherwise there might be enough residual heat for you to not have to worry about that. So So while that sauce is going, you still have to remember you have other things in the oven. So we're gonna check on our salmon because it's been about 10 minutes. You can kind of feel whether it's done or not. And yeah, so just 10 minutes in a convection oven, this is done. You want it to be slightly undercooked, about medium rare in the middle. And that is what we have here just after 10 minutes of cooking. So make sure you set a timer when you are cooking or you'll forget about it and overcook it, guaranteed. Okay, so we're gonna keep working on our sauce, adding in more and more butter. So you can see how creamy this is getting, how perfectly emulsified it is. And so just because you made it to this stage, there still is room to mess it up. So you gotta be careful. If you're not gonna eat it right away, don't just leave it over a hot burner and walk away because you'll come back and it will have broken. So either keep it just at room temperature and then you can gently heat it a little bit when you're about to eat it while stirring, or have it on a very, very, very low simmer. And keep an eye on it. If you come look at it, it's starting to break, you might still be able to save it by whisking it again, but there will become a point where if you neglected it too long, you have to start over. Okay, so look at how creamy and beautiful that is. Yeah, delicious. And you can always add more lemon juice if you want to it, if you want it to be a little bit more tart, a little more salt if you'd like it as well. But for now, I'm gonna turn this off. All right, we're gonna check on our baby kale. Okay. So it is definitely on its way. It's about halfway done, so we need to rotate it, flip it around. The bits on top that were starting to get crispy, move them around so everybody has a chance at getting that same texture. All right, back in the oven it goes. Okay, so the last stage of this dish, we just need to get the roasted baby kale out of the oven. It's been there for about a half hour. So even though it's just a leafy green, this is the way you gotta cook it to make it taste good. All right, you can see how much it's darkened. Got bits of crispiness. And we're not making kale chips, so the whole thing doesn't have to be crispy, but you do want it to be cooked, so some of it is. All right, so to assemble this dish, we're gonna take a good piece of our wild king salmon. Okay, so we got a healthy amount of kale on the plate with there, and then come in with your sauce. You can just spoon that right over. All right, and there you go. That is wild salmon with a blueberry butter sauce, roasted baby kale. That's it for today. You can find this recipe in the Primal Paleo cookbook by biOptimizers. All right, guys, see you next time.